Makkot Daf Yud Gimel to Yud Daled Amud Beis, the third and last parak of Masechta Makkot, Elohein Hagolin, growth and discomfort, Azhara Manayin. Here we have the whole, or a whole dimension of our approach to discomfort, to pain, to suffering, to Yisurin, and specifically to the Yisurin that are inflicted on a person, the pain and suffering that is inflicted on a person through a Beis Din, as an act of punishment. So we'll understand many interesting things here, because at the end of the day, how we respond to resistance determines our growth. Whether we're working in a gym, or we're running, or we're expressing ourselves in the world of Musar, at the end of the day, our growth is the way we respond to resistance. Whether it's to physical resistance or it's the resistance of our own human nature. And when we resist the forces of nature, the resistance causes discomfort. So growth and discomfort go hand in hand. It's not possible to grow without discomfort. If one's going to go and work out, or one's going to exercise in any kind of way, you're not going to grow if you're not willing to get to the limits, to the boundaries of your capability, which means you're going to feel significant discomfort. And it's no different in areas of spiritual growth and in Torah. The thing is, we like to avoid discomfort. That's a natural human survival trait, that we want to avoid discomfort, which means it's natural for us to avoid growth. To embrace growth is a decision, it's a choice, it's self-discipline. It requires an enormous amount of effort and mesirus nefesh. Sometimes we can choose our areas of resistance. We can decide, my area of resistance is going to be, I'm going to resist my Yetzer Hara, I'm going to resist my natural, instinctual tendencies to do things which the Torah considered as inappropriate. I will resist my natural impulses. That's resistance, and from that resistance we grow. Sometimes we don't choose resistance, we choose leisure and comfort. And then there comes a time, if the Ribbono Shel Olam values us, He gives us resistance. He gives us things that we have to then resist and overcome. And through that we're able to grow. And whether we embrace that resistance or we resist the resistance is what determines the level of our growth. Let's have a look at the Gemara here. We start with a Tosefta at the beginning of this parak, where the Tosefta says, I want to give you a bit of a background of Malchus. This is the parak that actually deals with Malchus, with the punishment of lashing, which is the punishment for transgressing a sin in the Torah, which doesn't have another specific punishment attached to it. So the Tosefta says, Zeh haklal, kol mitzvot lo ta'aseh, sheyesh be'en ma'aseh. Any negative directive in the Torah, a mitzvah lo ta'aseh, thou shalt not do, which entails an activity, lokin alea et ha'arbaim, then if one transgresses that with evidence and warning and so on, there are the 40 lashes. V'she'en ba'en ma'aseh, ein lokin alea et ha'arbaim. And if there's no action, you did something wrong, the Torah said don't do, and you did, but it didn't involve a physical action. Then there's no malchus. All the other negative mitzvahs of the Torah entail an azhara. We'll see that word a lot in this piece of Gemara, a warning not to do. However, and it means that if one does it, even if one doesn't get malchus, but one's gone against the decree of the king. In the Perush HaMishnayos, the Rambam lays out the whole principle very beautifully. You need to know all these principles. A lot of them are stated in our Mishnah and in the Perek. If a person is guilty, if the punishment is karet, the soul is cut off, or death by heaven, not by Beis Din, but Hashem will cause death. If it's one of those transgressions, and Hashem has specifically said, don't do this, then you will get malchus, even though there is another punishment in the Torah, you would still get malchus. And if you got the 40 lashings and you did tshuva, then the karet is removed. Then the heavenly penalty is removed from a person. And that's why the punishment is a privilege, not a liability, because it enables one to remove oneself, chas v'sholom, of a chiyuv chorus and of a chiyuv mitzvah b'dei shemayim. It's a little bit, we've got to look at punishments of Beis Din more as a surgery than punishment. You could say, God forbid, a person is suffering from a terrible disease and the doctors say he needs chemotherapy. If you just look at the chemotherapy without understanding the disease, you say, what kind of brutal system is this? They take a perfectly healthy person and they start pumping poison into his body, and he suffers terrible yisurim because of that. He was fine before. No, he wasn't fine before. You just couldn't see that he wasn't fine before. And the chemotherapy is actually going to remove the thing that would otherwise have killed him. That's what Malchus is. Malchus is a surgical treatment that removes the blemish which would otherwise cause mita b'dei shamayim or chorus. It's a different approach to Malchus. And so he goes on, every mitzvah is either a mitzvah to do something or a warning not to do something. Hatzivuyu mitzvat aseh, v'azara mitzvat lo ta'aseh. Hatzivuyu is a mitzvah aseh, a positive mitzvah. Azara is a negative mitzvah. And in the negative mitzvah, arba'a lashonot, the Torah expresses negative mitzvahs in 4 ways. Either it says, law, thou shalt not, al, do not, hishamer, be careful not, pen, lest you do. Those are the different ways the Torah mentions it. V'yesh lavin she'ein ha'aver aleim chayev malkot v'af al pi she'avar v'asa ma'aseh asur. There are cases where even though you did something, there was an activity. The Tosefta talks about where there's no action. Says the Rambam, there are cases where there is an action and still there's no malchus. Aval ya'anishenu Hashem al averato b'ma sheyadua lefanav yitaleh. In such a case, the Ribono Shel Olam will punish one for things that he did, even though there's no punishment b'dei shamayim. That means the surgeon is basically saying, sorry, there's nothing I can do. That's when the Beis Din says, no malchus, we're not going to lash you for this. That's not a thing of, oh, phew, I've managed to get away from malchus. It's the surgeon actually saying, sorry, nothing I can do for you. And that's very sad news to get for a person. So it's a different approach to punishment. Because our whole approach to these halachot, our approach in the Torah to law is not a legal approach. It's not about law. It's not about a system of law. That would exist even if we didn't have a Torah. Says our Mishnah in the beginning, our Mishnah lists a whole lot of cases where there's malchus. Explains Rashi, it doesn't list all the cases of malchus. It's only giving us those cases, it gives us those cases where there is a chiyuv karet, where the soul, we're told, will be cut off, and there's malchus, lashwin yesh malkot b'chayvei kritut, to teach us that even when there's a chiyuv kores, there is still malchus. Because we go like Rabbi Akiva on Yud Gimel Amud Beis, where Rabbi Akiva says, chayvei kritut yishno b'klal malkot arba'im. Even if a person is going to get kores, God forbid, there's still malchus. Why? Why is this not 2 punishments? Why is he not getting punished twice? He's getting lashes here and he's getting chorus in Shemayim. That's 2 punishments. No, says Rabbi Akiva, if you do tshuva after the malchus or with the malchus, then there's no misa b'dei Shemayim. Then you're excused in Shemayim. And that's why there is malchus, even if it's a case of chorus. Chayvi mitzvot beit din. But if there's a case where a person is guilty both of a physical death sentence, a Beis Din death sentence, capital punishment, and malchot, then he doesn't get malchot. Then he doesn't get the malchot. Because there's no way he can get out of the death sentence. Even if he does tshuva, capital punishment will still apply. And therefore it will be land up that he's been punished twice for the same thing. It gets malchus and death sentence. So in that kind of case, he doesn't get the death sentence. That's the Shittas Rabbi Akiva. The Sefer Mitzvahs Kedolos, the Smag, a really important Sefer, one of the early Svarim that gathered together all the mitzvahs aseh and lo ta'aseh of the Torah by Rabbi Moshe Mikotzi, 13th century, says in the case of Nosen Zara Mizara Lamoilech, it was a particular Avodah Zorah where one brought one's children to this idol worshipping with fire and so on. And the din there is if you gave some of your children over to Molech, that would be an avera for which there's punishment and death. But if you gave all your children over, there's no death. V'yesh tam b'zeh l'tshuvat haminim, says the Smag. And for those who want to ask, well, how can that be? Kal v'chomer, if you get Misa, if you get the capital punishment for giving one child, God forbid, over to Molech, and you give all your children, certainly it should be worse. Because Misa, capital punishment, like Malchus, is a kapara, it's an atonement. It's a privilege. And here the surgeon wants to say to him, sorry, this has gone too far. We can't help you. We can't even give you a death sentence. For your neshama, a death sentence is surgery. It's removing the body from the soul. That's the ultimate surgery. And the doctor is saying, in this case, the Beis Din is saying, sorry, we can't even do that for you. We can't even save your neshama by separating it from your body. You've got to leave it to Hashem to deal with. And that's what the whole idea of Yisurin, of suffering. Here we're talking about suffering imposed by Beis Din, but the idea of where the Gemara says back in Yuma, Sin me ahava usmechim be Yisurin, people who do the mitzvahs, asay of the Torah with ahava, with love, and when they are Yisurim, when they suffer Yisurim, they feel joy, because they understand Hashem is healing them. There is healing in difficulty. There is healing in hardship. And one has to be able to find the simcha, to find the joy, as hard as that is, to mine out the joy from hardship. That's the ultimate gevura, that's the strongest coming close to Hashem. We've got the idea of Ashrei HaGever Asher Tiyasreinu. Hashem is sufficiently concerned about you to heal you, even though the healing is going to be painful. It's the Baratanya in Perek Chavav talks about how God talking to you through hardship is God talking to you in a mysterious, secret way. It's not obvious. When God blesses you, it's obvious. But when God talks to you in hardship, you've got to search for the godliness. You've got to search for the divine. You've got to search for the kindness and for the joy in the hardship. But that's a much higher level of communication from Hashem and a much higher level of joy when you're successful in actually being able to get there and to find that. And it's interesting how when we're in comfort, when Hashem blesses us with comfort, we generally don't respond well to it. We don't, from a spiritual perspective, we don't always respond well to it. When Hashem afflicts us with hardship, we immediately, why me? Why is God picking on me? Where's God? All of a sudden we become religious. We're asking, where's God? Even secular people are asking, where's God? Where's God been all this time? It's a great question. That means you believe in God. That means you're coming close to God. You're engaging in conversation with God. And that leads, in some cases, as we've discussed recently, in cases of hostages and soldiers and ordinary people in the street who have come much closer to Hashem through the hardships of the last 18 months. So now we get into our Gemara, a principle of Ein Onesh Bli Azhara. There has to be, in order for a punishment to be given by Beit Din, the transgression has to be mentioned twice in two different ways in the Torah. The transgression has to be mentioned in terms of punishment. If you do this, you will get malchus, or you will get chorus, or whatever. And it also has to be mentioned as thou shalt not do this. They both have to be mentioned, which is strange. Surely it's enough if Hashem says, if you break Shabbos, I will kill you. Surely you get from there that you're not supposed to break Shabbos. No, says the Torah. We've also got to have an azhara. We've got to have a warning. So we have the three psukim, which I won't go through right away, which deals with the two halachot we have in our Mishnah. The one halacha is habal mikdash tameh. If a person comes into the Beis HaMikdash and he is tameh, he is contaminated with tumah, that is a case for which there's malchot. And the Gemara says, I understand that because there are two psukim. There's a pasuk that says, thou shalt not come into the Beis HaMikdash when you are tameh, and there's a pasuk which says, and if you do come into the Beis HaMikdash when you're tameh, there's chorus. However, the tameh she'achalet hakodesh, if a person who's contaminated with tumah eats kodesh from a korban or from truma or whatever, there's also malchot. Our Mishnah says, I know there's a punishment because it says, if a person eats from a korban and he is tameh, he will get karet, that soul will be cut off. So I know there's a terrible punishment. But where does it say thou shalt not? And of course the question is, why does it have to say thou shalt not? If you know that the law, that if you exceed the speed limit, you're going to get a fine of $1,000, don't you understand that you're not supposed to exceed the speed limit? You have to be told, don't exceed the speed limit. And if you do, there'll be a fine of $1,000. The Torah says, yes, you need both. Why? So the Sefer HaChinuch explains it in Mitzvah Samachtet. Lo yaspik lanu azkarat ha'onesh b'mitzvah b'li azhara. It's not sufficient just to be told the punishment without the warning. And he explains that the reason for this is if the Torah just said, if you do this, the punishment is that. If you do A, the punishment is X. Says the Chinuch, that would seem that it's up to you to trade with Hashem. okay, if the punishment is only X, I'm sufficiently motivated to want to do the Avera, then I'll take the punishment. I'll get 40 lashes, it's okay. I'll do the punishment, I'll have a good time, and I'll get the 40 lashes. It would seem, as he says, as if you can trade with Hashem, as if it becomes like mekach umemkar. Ve'ena kavana la mitzvot bekach. And here you've got the laying out of the principles of Mlota says. Ela sha'akel letovatenu mena'anu bidvarim. Hashem has restricted us from certain things for our own good. V'hodienu b'miktzatan ha'onesh ha'magiya lanu. And he told us the punishment. So the punishment is a gift to help us manage our impulse. That's what the punishment is. If you do, you should know that if you do this, you're going to be punished. So don't do it because doing it is bad for your soul, not because doing it will get a punishment. Don't do it because doing it is bad for your soul. And if you're tempted to do it, use the fear of punishment to hold yourself back. So that's a gift of punishment to help you restrain yourself. The fact is to drive, to exceed the speed limits and drive recklessly is dangerous, it's bad, it's corrupt, it's unethical, it's immoral, it's against the Torah, whether or not there's a fine. The reason you're not allowed to do it is not because if you do it, there's a fine. The fine is just there to incentivize you to do the right thing, to do what is good for you at the end of the day. However, milvad, this is all apart from ha'avarat rutzono. There's another thing that you've done. It's not just that your soul has been injured by this activity which God has told you don't do. It's not good for you. Another thing, you've disobeyed your beloved Ribbono Shel Olam, the Ribbono Shel Olam who loves and cares for you, the Ribbono Shel Olam who just wants you to grow and do well. You've ignored him and you've gone against his will and you've risked your neshama. Shehi kasher min hakol, that's much worse than the punishment. That's worse than malchus, that's worse than the lashings, it's worse than karet, it's worse than mitah, it's worse than death. You've driven a wedge into the relationship between you and the Ribbono Shel Olam. What's worse for the neshama than that? What could you do to your neshama more hurtful, more damaging? What could you do to Hashem more hurtful and damaging? You worried about the lashing? You worried about a death sentence? That's nothing. Look what you did. You alienated yourself from your source. You cut yourself off from the Ribbono Shel Olam himself. That's kasher min hakol. And therefore, lo yodia hakel ha'onesh haba aleinu al avarat mitzvah ela im kein odienu tchila sheretzono hu shelo na'aseh oto hadavar she'onesh ba'alav. This is not just a technical halachic principle that you can't give a punishment unless there's an azhara. This is a philosophy of halakha. The philosophy of halakha is the Ribbono Shel Olam wants you to know the driving force behind desisting from transgression. The driving force is not fear of punishment. The driving force is distance from Hashem. The driving force is cutting off the relationship between Hashem and oneself. That's why we don't do Averot. The punishment is just to help us manage ourselves, to use the instinct of fear to add to our self-management. But the driving force, why we don't do wrong, is so that we would not, chas v'sholom, land up doing something which is kasher min hakol, which is ha'avarat ritzono, breaking the will of Hashem. So sometimes we choose our area of resistance. We decide we'll come to the shir and we'll learn. We'll do chazor on the Gemara. We won't talk Lashon Hara. We'll give tzedakah. We'll give chesed. These are all inviting resistance into our lives and overcoming that resistance and thereby growing. But there are times when resistance is imposed upon us, when we don't invite enough resistance and Hashem cares enough about us. He gives us hardship. He gives us a rough times. He gives us something that we have to grapple with, that we're challenged by, that we have to overcome, that we have to work. And through that, our muscle grows. We become greater. And that's the meaning of punishment in Torah, whether it's punishment that are based in institutes or it's punishment that Hashem gives us, to see it not as punishment, but as the opportunity to grow through overcoming hardship in ways we should have but didn't through our own devices.